Come nice and close.
Yeah.
Yes, all good. How's that sounding?
Great.
Okay, well, look, thank you for coming along today, and I want to start by acknowledging Konal Patel, the owner of this superette here today, and a couple of previous owners, Raj Chopra and Jitesh Arora, who have been previous owners, and all of them have suffered from retail crime, actually violent incidents, and unfortunately their story is far too typical across this city. People going to work and being attacked in their workplace and having things stolen from them, so we're very much concerned. The biggest change between the focus of the previous government, which was all about reducing the prison population and the needs of the perpetrators of crime, our government has shifted to an absolute focus on reducing the number of victims of crime. That is what we're on about, and so we want to reduce the number of victims of serious crime by 20,000 people. And there's lots of things that we've been doing to do that. First and foremost, it was around bringing back three strikes legislation. I want to acknowledge my Associate Minister, Nicole McKee. We've got sentencing laws before the Parliament, reducing the ability of judges to massively reduce prison sentences for convicted criminals. And then we recognise that a lot of the retail crime that's going on around is connected to organised crime, and so dealing with gangs is a critical part. If you want to reduce the number of victims of crime, the obvious place to start is with people who are causing the most victims, and so we've given the police extra tools to deal with gangs. What I'm announcing today is a series of changes, again, which are enabling to give retail operators more options or more tools to deal with people who are leaving their stores, stealing stuff, and creating making life difficult for people who are just trying to go about their ordinary business. So the four elements of it are, as you know, tidying up the rules around citizens' arrest. At the moment, the circumstances are very limited. And they can't occur during the day for small, less than $1,000 offences. And so we're going to change that so that citizens' arrests can be made and people can be detained for any breaking of the Crimes Act at any time of the day. Secondly, we'll provide a process for how citizens should follow an arrest, particularly in terms of contacting the police straight away and ensuring the safety of others. Thirdly, we want to clarify that the reasonable force available to the arrests may include the use of restraints only when reasonable in the circumstances. And fourthly, updating the excessively restrictive defence of property provisions in the Crimes Act in regard to how much reasonable force a person can use to defend their property. And all these things are about dealing with the circumstances that I think many New Zealanders would have seen and experienced over the last few years, with people walking out of shops, stealing stuff and not paying, and the owners and the general public not really having the ability to do anything about it. And we don't think that is sustainable. Now, of course, the obvious concern that many people have is that we don't want to encourage an uptick in violence and vigilantism and the Wild West. And of course, none of this is compulsory for any company or any business. It's really a set of tools that they can use if they want to. And everybody, of course, in every instance, in every circumstances, needs to consider their own safety first, and that goes without saying. So with that, we're all very happy to take questions.
Minister, are you concerned though that we could see more retailers injured or even killed as a result of these changes?
Well, look, I'm very concerned about the high level of retail crime at the moment, and we want to do everything we can to reduce that, and sending a clear message that there are consequences for doing that. I think part of the reason why we've seen an increase over the past few years is that certain people have come to the conclusion that they can get away with it and nobody will ever stop them, and so we want to change that message.
Giving people power, though, to detain or arrest, or more power to detain or arrest when they're not trained to deal with these situations, though, surely isn't that a worry?
Like I say, every circumstance has to be dealt with for the circumstances that people face at the time. And we're worried about this current situation. We don't think people have enough tools available to them, but ultimately every individual and every business has to decide for themselves in any given circumstances whether it's safe to intervene. And quite rightly, on many occasions people will conclude that it's not, and they won't. But at least they will now have the opportunity.
Do you think these changes will deter criminals from engaging in robberies?
I think it will, and that's the purpose of it, because right now many have concluded that there's nothing to stop them walking out of the supermarket or wherever with their trolley, surrounded by people saying don't do it, and just going all the way to the car, getting in the car and driving off, and they have no consequences, and we've got to change that.
Are you concerned, though, that we could see them potentially bringing weapons or bigger weapons or more weapons, knowing that people might actually try and stop them?
Yes, you've always got to be mindful of that, but the answer surely can't be that we just accept that people can just walk out of stores, not pay for anything, steal everything, because ultimately what we're dealing with is people who are just trying to make a living, an honest living, trying to operate a shop, trying to go about their lives and make a living. And when people steal from them, it makes it very hard. And it also makes it hard for everybody else who's trying to buy stuff, because the cost of this isn't free. It all goes through to the law-abiding citizens who actually obey the law, pay for their stuff, and they're so sick and tired of having people stealing things, getting away with it, and having no consequences.
And so, worry it might be a little bit murky, though. I mean, what defines reasonable use of force? And how do you define that, really?
The courts have long worked their way through all these issues, and they're well understood. And what we're trying to do is give greater clarity there, because we think it's important. People are rightly wanting to stay within the law, and so what we're doing today is broadening those circumstances. They were overly restrictive, broadening those circumstances so people feel confident about what they can and can't do.
And what would happen, say, if a retailer followed an offender and acted to try and stop them, and something happened and perhaps they died? Would they be up for manslaughter?
The person that they were detaining, look, all those circumstances.
Sorry, the retailer that went after them.
Yes.
Say if they tried to stop them and something happened and the offender died, would that retailer be liable for manslaughter?
Well, all those circumstances have to be dealt with appropriately by the courts, and it's only the reasonable use of force. And so this is, never. There's never been an understanding that people can use unreasonable force or excessive force, and so that still remains the case. So they're in very limited grounds, but they were far too limited, and we're just broadening those today.
Do you have some examples of what reasonable force could look like?
No, not on hand, but obviously stopping somebody from moving, restraining them is fundamentally what we're on about. Not necessarily a headlock or anything like that. It's just holding them steady, and then the role is to call for the police and to hold them until such a time as that happens. The alternative, which is what we have at the moment, is just standing by and watching while people take away stuff, and I think the general public is fed up with that.
Minister, can you provide a bit more detail about who was consulted on these changes? The first unions came out this morning and has concerns that they weren't consulted, being a workers' union. So how are these changes? Who did you consult?
Well, Sonny Koshel here, the ministerial advisory group that I set up for retail crime 6 months ago as a government, or later last year, and they're working on a broad range of options that we've got to deal with the ongoing retail crime suggestion. And Sonny, as you know, has been very active in the retail sector over the last few years, talking to many people and the concerns that they have, and so he's consulted in that sense. Obviously the process from here is that we're working to introduce this legislation in the next few months, and it will go to a select committee, and where everybody will have an opportunity to have a say. And look, that is the purpose of a select committee, where that people from all walks of life will have their views and impressions, and will consider all that.
In terms of law, it works in precedents. You mentioned the fact that the use of reasonable force is something that is understood. Do you have any concerns the fact that it's understood in the case of a police officer or in that circumstance, but not in the circumstance of citizens' arrest because they are so rare?
Well, look, the courts have developed these things over time, and they will continue to. And so when we pass this legislation, then obviously it will be tested in the courts, and people will get an understanding around that. The simple thing that we're trying to achieve is giving people the ability, if they want to use it, and only if they want to use it, to detain somebody if they're in the process of breaking the law and stealing things from their premises. And so as long as it takes for the police to arrive. And I think it's significant to be able to do that, and the fact that people can't do that now safely is a problem.
Is the police commissioner on board with this idea, that he's comfortable with this frontline staff being involved in call-outs to citizens' arrests?
Well, we've worked with consultation with the police and all the other parts of the agency. Ultimately, it's for Parliament and the government to decide what the laws are, but yes, we've been in full consultation with them.
So would an example of this be, say, in a supermarket where someone with a trolley is walking out and security guards, for example, feel like they can't do anything? Would this enable them to go and prevent them from leaving?
Well, yes, in theory, yes, absolutely. So at the moment, I've experienced it myself on a couple of occasions with people just walking out of the supermarket, chased by security, but ultimately they're not able to do anything, and they just have to watch while they take all their stuff out of the trolley, put it into the car and drive away. And it just doesn't, it's not right.
Do you feel like police aren't responding fast enough, and where we have to turn to this as a solution?
Look, the police do their very best to deal with all the circumstances that they have to, but the reality is that you can't have a police car on every corner dealing with every circumstance, and we're a spread out country, and so they do their very best in the circumstances, but there are occasions when people need to take things into their hands.
And it's quite often unfolding right in front of them, and police cannot get there for 10 or 20 minutes, but we do have security staff that will be able to actually do something about it now.
Sir, I have one question. There is a reason we are doing it right in front of a dairy, not in a supermarket. Because retail crime affects the dairy owners, the retail shop owners, which are mainly ethnic communities. So you are talking about shoplifting. I don't think shoplifting is a big concern of the community. They are talking about aggravated robberies and robberies. I know you cannot explain reasonable force, but can you, like you're talking about stealing, but in the note you're saying to stop any crime offense at any time. So
yes.
Are you talking only about shoplifting? You're also talking about robberies, aggravated...
Of course.
So you're talking about aggravated robberies?
Yes, potentially, but of course that is a much, much more dangerous situation, and of course people will have to take, would be very careful in those circumstances.
So I have two follow-ups then. Like in a dairy, it's a mom and pop store, so it's manned by only one person at a time.
Yes.
And you have youth offenders, which is my second question, coming with one axe or one hammer. How do you suppose a person sitting inside will be able to restrain two youths who are with a hammer?
Well, but I mean, this change is not going to solve every problem in every circumstance. Obviously, what we're the broader issue there is having when you're dealing with serious violent crime, you need to have real consequences, and so our sentencing reforms are very significant in that sense, and for youth offenders equally. So this is a tool that will be able to help. In certain circumstances, to send a message that things are not tolerated. It may be appropriate in certain circumstances when people have a weapon, but it may very well not be. And so, but people have to make a judgment in any instance.
So, can you provide guidance on if the offender is a youth? What will happen in that case? If somebody restrains it or, put restraints everything, what happens if the offender is a youth?
It applies equally to young people.
So you'll treat that youth offender as an adult in this case?
Is a what? Sorry?
As in, you can restrain the youth. If it's a 14-year-old, you can put him inside a room, lock in a dairy?
Yes, well, you can use reasonable restraints, and so how that is defined is something that will be worked through in the courts, but yes.
How frequently are citizens actually prosecuted for taking matters into their own hands?
Look, I don't have those stats in front of me, but the reality is that because people are concerned and uncertain about it, most people just don't. And so what we're trying to do here is to give greater certainty about what people can and can't do. So if they choose to, they can step in and detain somebody.
Are they concerned about breaking the law, though, or concerned about their own safety?
Well, both. And so concerns about safety will continue. And look, I mean, I've heard some people saying, you know, we're worried about this, and of course, this change will force nobody to do anything in terms if they don't want to. If a business is concerned, if they have a policy that they don't want to intervene in any circumstances, well, that's up to them. All we're providing here is some tools that people can use if the circumstances are right.
And of course, one of the other points that we've made, that the Minister's made earlier, is that if there is a citizen's arrest, they must inform New Zealand Police and take instruction from them immediately. So if it's determined that there is something that's gone way outside of what is deemed to be reasonable, the police will tell them over the phone and how to react to that.
On that note, obviously one of the reforms is requiring the person to make that call. A lot of these incidents, the scenarios that have been mentioned, were kind of a spur of the moment. What timeline are you offering? When do you want people to make that call if they're involved in some kind of robbery?
Well, as soon as reasonably practical. I mean, if they're in the middle of holding somebody, then that's difficult to make that call, obviously. So every circumstance is different, but the clear direction is that they need to contact the police as soon as they can and take instructions from them.
And what about, say, the use of a weapon to stop someone? Would that be another question? Would you only use, say, your hands to restrain someone? Would you whack them in something or to try and stop them?
No, well, the use of reasonable force is clear in terms of trying to restrain somebody. What we've enabled is the use of some thing to restrain, to physically restrain somebody, and that may be, so that's the various opportunities that people have, but we're not talking about people using weapons, obviously.
Minister, in terms of these restrictions on citizens' arrests that you've mentioned throughout, have you looked at the advice for why they were so restrictive in the first place?
Well, they go back a very long way, and
so they're very long-standing.
Have
you looked at the advice for why they've been so long-standing for such a long time?
Not specifically, other than to say I think the issue is that what we're responding to is a significant increase in retail crime over the past few years. So, for whatever reason, behaviour has changed, and so people have got the message that it's okay to do this, and the consequences haven't been clear. And so in terms of terrible instances of aggravated robbery, the primary solution is to deal with firmer sentences. That's why we're restricting the ability of judges to massively reduce sentences. The 3 strikes legislation. This is something that will help in certain circumstances, and we think it will make a real difference.
There's something up on data as well, and in the latest release about crime stats dropping. It says violent crime is not a category of data that police tracks, and therefore data is based off of Chartered Daily's post on X.
Yep.
Is that an official source?
Well, it's one that the police use, and look, there are many statistics that people draw on. The one that we often refer to is the crime survey that the Ministry of Justice does, and that's shown promising signs in terms of the number of victims of crime. But I don't think anybody would say that we've got the problem solved. We've got real challenges around restoring law and order, and we're determined to do that. We feel like we're making progress, and we're working on legislation on many fronts. And this is one of the things that we think will make a real difference.
It's more like, can you trust their data? Is it better than checks?
Well, it's something that the police are comfortable with, and if they're comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with it.
Also, you have
Okay.
1 or 2 more questions?
Just wondering,
I have one.
Hear from Sonny Horshall about his work in the space as well.
Sure, shuffle across a bit.
Come across, Sonny. Come across in front of the mic, Sonny.
Yeah, can you talk to us about your process going through this, consulting with retailers, your curriculum plugged into that space? What have you heard from them about this change, and are they looking forward to it?
Yeah, so first of all, we are backing our retailers to better protect themselves and their property. The New Zealanders, they must have the legal tools to protect their businesses, their families, and their properties. So during the process that we have been preparing for the independent advice and also the evidence-based policies proposals to the minister. So A is we have board members. They represent their different industries, the retail industry, the liquor, the dairies, and the jewelry stores, and the supermarkets. So we have the inputs from them, and then we also have gone out to the key stakeholders across the retail sector, including hospitality, NZ as well, and the MT and so many others. So once we have the stakeholders' response inputs, and then we consult and come up with the proposals.
So Labour has raised some concerns about the ministerial advisory group and the costs of it and how much you're earning per day. What would you say to that? Do you feel like you're making good progress?
I think that's very low thinking. Talking about the cost, when the advisory group was set up, there are set budgets, and we are operating under very tight budgets. And I can tell you, we are basically underspending right now. But the bigger issue we need to talk is the crime. The retail crime is costing New Zealand $2.6 billion per annum. That's $127 million per month, $50 million per week, over $7 million per day. So what would you like? Would you like to stop that crime? Would you, or would you just talk about a fraction of cost that we are finding the solutions for this one? So yeah.
So one question. To be clear, you said a youth offender engaging in aggravated robbery will be covered in these amendments, right?
Yes.
So tell me one thing, like for example, this has been the war cry of the community that tackle youth offenders. That's why when you came in the government, you started the boot camp. This particular citizens' power to arrest has been submitted to the parliament many times. Mr. Kaushal himself in June when Labour was in government, if you look at the petition, this was part of the petition. You didn't implement it then. You went with boot camps. Now after a year, is this a recognition by the government that your measure of boot camp to tackle in young youth offenders is not working? So you are now going back to what he said in June 2023?
Not at all. It's really just a recognition that we've got to pull many levers to deal with an extremely complex problem. Youth offending is extraordinarily complicated, dealing with young lives, and so part of it's about sending that clear, strong message. Part of it's having tough consequences, but of course you've also got to deal with the much broader issue. So equally important is dealing with truancy and making sure kids are at school, dealing with addictions, all those sorts of things. So we've got a broad plan, and this is one step that will help. And altogether, over time, I think we'll, as a country, see fewer victims of this sort of crime. And so ultimately, this all comes back to wanting to make it easier for hard-working New Zealanders to do their job in safety. I just acknowledge the very difficult time that everybody here has had over the course of their careers, and we don't claim that we're going to solve it tomorrow, but if we keep on making steps such as we announced today, over time we'll give them the better ability to respond. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right.